Welcome to the Whispering Tome.
Journey to the North. Tonight, we travel far north, to a coastline of fjords and dark pines, to a winter night when the wind howls outside and a longhouse glows like a single ember in the snow. This is not the world of raiding ships or blazing battles. This is the quieter, hidden side of the Viking Age. A single winter day seen from inside a wooden hall. A place of smoke, stories, family, and fire. So lie back, let your breathing slow, and imagine the world turning back over 1,000 years, to a small farm on the coast of western Norway sometime around the year 950 CE. The Viking Age, as scholars define it, stretched from approximately 793 CE to 1066 CE. These dates mark the raid on Lindisfarne Monastery in Northumbria to the Battle of Stamford Bridge. But for the people living through this period, there were no such neat boundaries. Life simply continued, generation after generation, shaped by the rhythms of seasons, the demands of survival, and the bonds of family and community. Our story takes place near the middle of this period. By 950, the age of the Great Raids was not yet over, but it was changing. Norwegian chieftains were consolidating power. Christianity was beginning to spread, though slowly and unevenly. Many farms still honoured the old gods. Trade networks stretched from Byzantium to the British Isles, from the Baltic to the Mediterranean. But here, on this particular farm, on this particular winter day, the great sweep of history feels distant. What matters is the immediate: the storm gathering over the fjord, the dwindling supplies in the storage shed, the health of the livestock, the warmth of the fire. Let us begin our journey into this world. Let us spend one full day and night inside a Viking Longhouse, experiencing the textures, smells, sounds, and rhythms of life as it was actually lived by the vast majority of people in Scandinavia during the Viking Age. Chapter 1. Setting the scene. The Longhouse in winter. It is deep winter. Snow lies across the fields like thick wool. The fjord is dark and heavy, edged in ice that grows thicker each night. The sun is low, weak, and slow to rise. This far north, in coastal Norway around the 60th parallel, winter days are short. The sun may rise around 9 a.m. and set by 3 p.m., leaving long hours of twilight and darkness. Archaeological evidence from sites like Borg in Lofoten and Leira in Denmark shows us what the landscape around such farms looked like. These were working agricultural settlements, not fortified strongholds. Fields, now buried under snow, would stretch out from the main buildings. Closer to the shore, there would be boathouses, storage buildings, workshops, and perhaps a separate smithy. On a small rise above the shoreline stands a long, low building. From far away, it looks almost like a ship turned upside down. This visual comparison is not coincidental. The same shipwrights who built the elegant vessels that carried Vikings across oceans also applied their skills to building houses. The curved roof beams, the overlapping planks, the careful joinery, all echo the construction techniques of ships. The roof is steep and thatched, weighed down with turf and stones against the wind. This design serves multiple purposes. The steep pitch allows snow to slide off rather than accumulating dangerously. The turf layer provides insulation. The stones prevent the wind from tearing away the thatch. At each end, wooden beams rise like the curving ribs of a dragon ship. These are not merely decorative. They are structural elements, supporting the roof ridge and adding stability to the entire building. This is the longhouse. In Old Norse, people might call it a langhus, literally a long house. The term is descriptive and functional. These buildings were indeed long, narrow structures, typically ranging from 15 to 30 meters in length, though some were even longer. Width was more constrained, usually between 5 and 8 meters. Archaeological excavations at sites like Trelleborg, Hedeby and Uppsala have revealed the construction techniques used in these buildings. The foundation consisted of stuns placed to support vertical wooden posts. These posts, usually made of oak or pine, formed the main structural framework. The walls were constructed using one of several techniques. The most common in Norway was the stave method, vertical planks slotted into horizontal sill beams at the bottom and wall plates at the top. The planks overlapped slightly, like the strakes of a ship hull, creating a weathertight seal. Gaps between planks were sometimes filled with moss, clay or animal hair mixed with tar. Inside, the longhouse is the heart of a farm. It serves multiple functions simultaneously. It is dwelling, workshop, storage facility, social hall, and place of ritual. In winter, almost the entire world of the family exists inside these walls. To step outside is to enter a hostile environment. To be inside is to be part of the household, the social unit that defines identity and safety. Inside, it is dim but warm. The contrast with the bright snow outside makes the interior seem darker than it actually is. As your eyes adjust, details emerge from the gloom. The air smells of smoke, wool, and dried fish. These are the characteristic scents of a Viking Age dwelling. Smoke is perhaps the most pervasive. With an open central hearth and limited smoke holes, the interior is constantly hazy. This smoke serves a purpose beyond heating. It preserves timbers, deters insects, and cures meat and fish hung from the rafters. Along the length of the hall, 2 rows of wooden posts march like trees. These are the main roof supports, typically spaced about 2 meters apart. They divide the interior into 3 longitudinal sections, a wider central nave and 2 narrower side aisles. Between the posts, benches and raised wooden platforms line the walls. These platforms, called bekker in Old Norse, are perhaps the most versatile elements of the longhouse. During the day, they serve as seating and workspace. At night, they become beds. The space beneath can be used for storage. Chests, boxes, barrels, and sacks are tucked away in these shadowy recesses. In the very center of the hall runs the most important feature, the hearth. This is not a fireplace in the modern sense, with a chimney and contained firebox. Instead, it is a long, shallow rectangle of packed earth and stone running down the center of the nave. Its length might be 3 or 4 meters, allowing multiple fires or one long fire. Firewood crackles here almost continuously throughout the winter. Birch, which burns hot and bright, is preferred for cooking fires. Pine, with its resinous wood, provides light but creates more soot. Oak, when available, burns long and slow, ideal for overnight fires. Above the hearth and along the ridge of the roof, smoke holes let out some of the smoke. Not all, never all. The roof beams are dark and shiny from years of soot accumulation. This patina of smoke-blackened wood would be visible in every longhouse, a testament to decades of fires. The smoke holes are adjustable, covered with wooden shutters that can be opened or closed depending on wind direction and weather. Managing these shutters is a skilled task. Open them too wide in a storm and snow and rain pour in. Close them too much and the hall fills with choking smoke. It is here, in this carefully balanced environment of warmth and smoke, light and shadow, that we will spend our day, sharing the quiet life of one Viking Age household, listening to the storm outside and the fire inside. Before we step fully into the life of this household, let us pause to consider how we know what we know about Viking longhouses. Our understanding comes from multiple sources: archaeology, written sources, experimental archaeology, and comparative ethnography. Archaeological excavations have uncovered dozens of longhouse sites across Scandinavia. Some of the most important include the settlement at Borg in Lofoten, Norway, which contained a chieftain's hall over 80 meters long. At Lyra in Denmark, excavations revealed multiple building phases spanning several centuries. At Stong in Iceland, a farm buried by volcanic ash in 1104 preserved remarkable details of daily life. These sites reveal patterns in construction, layout, and use. Post holes show where vertical timbers once stood. Hearth areas are marked by burned earth and concentrations of ash and charcoal. The outlines of platforms and benches can sometimes be detected in soil discoloration or the placement of stones. Artifacts found within these structures tell us about daily activities. Spindle whorls and loom weights indicate textile production. Whetstones and tool fragments show craftwork. Animal bones reveal diet and butchering practices. Fragments of pottery, soapstone vessels, and imported goods hint at trade connections. Written sources, though limited, provide additional information. The Icelandic sagas, written in the 13th century but describing earlier periods, contain descriptions of halls and daily life. While these must be used cautiously, they are literary works, not documentaries. They offer insights into social practices, spatial organization, and the cultural meaning of architectural features. For example, the concept of the high seat, the Ondvige, is mentioned repeatedly in saga literature. This was the place of honor, typically located along the north wall of the hall, facing the door. Archaeological evidence supports this literary tradition. Post holes at some sites show more substantial posts at certain locations, possibly marking high seat positions. Experimental archaeology has also contributed to our understanding. Projects like the reconstructed Longhouse at Borg and the Viking Ship Museum's working farm at Saglandle Lyra in Denmark have tested hypotheses about construction techniques, heating efficiency, and living conditions. These experiments reveal practical details that are hard to discern from excavation alone. How much firewood does it take to heat a longhouse in winter? How smoky does it actually get? How does smoke pattern affect the preservation of food? All these sources together allow us to reconstruct with reasonable confidence what a Viking longhouse looked like, how it was built, and how it functioned. Now, let us step inside and experience a day in the life of such a place. Chapter 2. Before dawn, the hall in the dark. It is still night when the day begins. The exact hour is impossible to determine. There are no clocks, no mechanical timekeeping devices. Time is marked by the sun, by the changing light, by the rhythms of work and meals and sleep. The longhouse lies in near darkness. The fire has burned low, down to a sleepy glow of red coals. These coals are precious. To let the fire die completely would be a serious failure. Rekindling a fire from scratch using flint and steel or the bow drill method is time-consuming and difficult. Far better to keep the fire alive through the night, banked under ash, ready to be coaxed back to flame in the morning. Shadows of roof beams crisscross the ceiling like the ribs of a sleeping whale. This comparison to ship architecture is evident everywhere. The longhouse roof, with its curved beams and overlapping construction, truly does resemble an overturned ship. Around the hall, people lie under woolen blankets and animal skins. They sleep on the raised platforms along the walls. These platforms are not bare wood. They are covered with layers of material. First, perhaps a woven mat of reeds or grass. Then a woolen blanket or cloth. Then furs or more blankets on top. The quality and quantity of these coverings vary according to status and wealth. The closer you are to the fire, the warmer your place. This is not just a matter of comfort, it is a social statement. Sleeping position in the longhouse reflects social position in the community. Archaeological evidence supports this spatial hierarchy. In excavations of longhouses, the most elaborate furnishings and the richest artifacts are typically found in the central sections, while the areas near the doors contain simpler, more utilitarian objects. Farther from the warmth, near the door at one or both ends of the hall, sleep servants and thralls. The word thrall, from Old Norse threll, refers to enslaved people. Slavery was a significant part of Viking Age Scandinavian society. Thralls might be people captured in raids, the descendants of captured people, or individuals who had fallen into bondage through debt or legal penalty. The only sounds in the dark hall are subtle. First, the hissing of the embers. As the fire dies down, wood contracts and cracks. Pockets of resin or moisture trapped in the wood expand and burst, creating tiny pops and hisses. The coals themselves shift and settle with faint sighs. Second, the soft breath of animals in the byre at the far end of the building. Many longhouses, particularly on smaller farms, incorporated the livestock shelter directly into the main building. This design, called a byre house or combined dwelling, had practical advantages. The body heat of the animals, cattle, sheep, sometimes horses, helped warm the entire structure. The division between human and animal space was marked by a low wooden partition, sometimes a wattle screen and sometimes just a difference in floor level. The byre section typically had a packed earth floor, easy to muck out. The human section might have wooden planks or a more finished earth floor. At the back of the hall, in the byre section, cattle and sheep stand together for warmth. Their bodies give off a steady heat like slow-burning stones. Large mammals like cattle can generate significant warmth. A full-grown cow produces heat equivalent to about 1,000 watts continuously. In a confined space, this adds up. Now and then, a cow shifts its weight, hooves knocking softly against the floor. Sheep huddle together, their wool providing excellent insulation. Occasionally, one bleeds softly in its sleep. Third, the occasional murmur of someone turning in their sleep. People shift position, pull blankets tighter, or murmur brief, nonsensical dream words. A child might cry out softly, then settle back into silence. But overall, the Longhouse is remarkably quiet. This is a community used to sleeping in close quarters. Privacy, as we understand it, does not exist. Daily life, sleep, intimate moments, illness, and death all take place in this shared space. Time passes. The passage is marked not by clock hands, but by subtle changes in the quality of darkness. Outside, the sky slowly changes from black to deep blue. This transition is gradual, almost imperceptible at first. The stars, brilliant in the clear, cold air, begin to dim. The constellation that the Norse called Karlsvogn, the wagon, our Big Dipper, wheels slowly around the pole star. Knowledge of the stars was important to the Vikings. For seafaring peoples, celestial navigation was essential. Even farmers, who spent most of their time on land, knew the stars. They marked the passage of seasons, they helped orient buildings and fields. Inside the Longhouse, this astronomical drama is invisible. The thick roof and walls block out all but the brightest light. But somewhere in the deeper instincts of the sleeping household, there is an awareness of approaching dawn. Rhythms of sleep begin to shift. Some people sleep more lightly. Dreams change character, becoming more vivid and easier to remember. Near the hearth, a figure begins to stir. This is not a sudden awakening, but a gradual emergence from sleep. First, perhaps, an unconscious awareness of temperature. The hall has grown cooler. The faint hiss of the coals sounds different. Then a more conscious thought. It is nearly time to wake the fire. This is one of the most important tasks of the day. The fire must be revived before it dies completely. This requires timing and experience. Too early and you waste sleep. Too late and the fire might go out, creating hours of extra work. Let us watch as this process begins. Chapter 3. The First to Wake. Fire and Chores. The first to wake is an older woman. Her exact role in the household could vary. She might be the husfrøya, the lady of the house, the wife of the farmer, or she might be an older servant, long trusted and familiar. Perhaps she is the farmer's mother, a widow who lives with her son's family. Whatever her specific relationship to the household, her role is clear. She is the keeper of the fire. This is a position of responsibility and respect. In Norse mythology, the fire was sacred. To maintain the household fire was to maintain the heart of the home, the center of life. She pulls back her blanket, and immediately the cold air touches her face and hands. Breath clouds in the dim light. For a moment, she sits on the edge of the sleeping platform, gathering herself. Sleep still clings to her, reluctant to let go. Her body aches slightly. The cold makes joints stiff. She is perhaps 50 years old, an age that, in the Viking period, marked her as an elder, though not yet ancient. Life expectancy in the Viking Age was shorter than today, though not as short as is sometimes imagined. If you survived childhood, a significant if, you might live into your 60s or even 70s. This woman has survived. She has weathered illnesses, hard winters, childbirth, and the occasional famine. She carries the knowledge of years. She knows when to plant barley and when to harvest it. She knows which herbs cure which ailments and which wild plants are safe to eat. She knows how to manage a household, how to preserve food, how to spin wool and weave cloth. And she knows how to wake a fire. She pulls on a thick woolen dress. This is not the simple garment it might appear. Viking Age clothing was carefully constructed, practical, and often beautiful. Women's dresses typically consisted of multiple layers. The innermost layer might be a linen or hemp undershift, a simple tunic-like garment. This would be worn against the skin, absorbing sweat and oils, protecting the outer garments. Over this goes the main dress, a long woolen garment. This might be a single piece, but more commonly, it was a two-part outfit, an underdress and a woolen apron dress or tunic worn over it. The apron dress, called a hangarock in modern scholarship, was a characteristic Viking Age garment. It was essentially a rectangular piece of wool that wrapped around the body and was held up by shoulder straps, pinned at the shoulders with distinctive oval brooches. These brooches, found in thousands of graves across Scandinavia, are among the most characteristic artifacts of Viking Age women. They were functional, holding the garment in place, but also decorative and symbolic. The woman in our story wears bronze brooches, simply decorated. A wealthier woman might have silver or even gilded bronze. The poorest might make do with simple bone or wooden pins. Over the dress, she pulls a second layer, a heavier overdress or tunic. Layering was key to staying warm. In the coldest weather, she might wear 3 or 4 layers. Today, 2 will suffice indoors. She wraps wool leg bindings around her lower legs. These are long strips of wool fabric wound around the calf and foot, providing both warmth and support. They serve a function similar to modern socks. Finally, she steps into soft leather shoes. These are simple, practical footwear, cut from a single piece of leather and stitched up the front or side. Everything she wears smells faintly of smoke. In winter, smoke clings to everything. Wool absorbs it, leather absorbs it, even skin and hair carry the scent. She kneels by the hearth and begins the first important task of the day, waking the fire. This is a process that requires knowledge and care. It cannot be rushed. First, she takes a long wooden poker, smoothed by years of use, and carefully rakes away the ash that covers the coals. Ash is an excellent insulator. A thick layer of ash over hot coals can keep them alive for many hours, even overnight. But to make flame, the coals must breathe. She rakes gently, mindful not to scatter the coals or smother them with ash. Carefully, she uncovers what she hoped to find, small, glowing coals, like tiny cherries in the dark earth. They pulse gently with internal heat, red-orange in the dim light. She cups her hand around them, feeling the warmth radiating onto her palm. The heat is comforting in the cold hall. She reaches for a wooden box kept near the hearth, opens it, and takes out dry kindling. This has been prepared in advance, during the day when there was more light and time. Small slivers of wood, dry as bone, split from the heart of pine or birch. She arranges a few slivers of kindling over the coals, building a tiny structure with air spaces for the flame to breathe. Then she leans close and blows gently, steadily. Her breath provides oxygen, the fuel for combustion. The coals brighten, heat increases. The kindling begins to smoke. She continues blowing, watching intently. A tiny flame appears, no larger than a candle flame, licking at the underside of a wood sliver. She adds another sliver, then another. The flame grows, reaching upward, finding fuel. Around her, the sleeping figures in the hall begin to shift. The sound of her work, the smell of fresh smoke, the subtle change in light as the fire grows, all these signal the coming day. She adds larger pieces of wood now, building up the fire in stages. Too much wood too fast will smother the flame, too little and it will die out. She knows the rhythm, the balance. She has done this almost every morning of her adult life. Slowly, the coals brighten, thin tongues of flame appear, then grow bolder. She adds a proper log, split firewood of birch, and it catches. The fire stretches, crackles, and then truly catches, sending sparks up into the air. They rise towards the smoke hole in the roof, tiny stars ascending, and disappear into the dimness. The fire is awake. Its light pushes back the darkness. Its warmth begins to spread through the hole, invisible but felt, like a gentle tide. With the fire alive, life in the Longhouse can begin. Before we continue with the activities of the morning, let us pause to consider the cultural and practical importance of fire in Viking Age Scandinavia. Fire was quite literally the center of life. Without fire, survival in the northern winter would be impossible. Fire provided heat, light, and the means to cook food. It preserved meat and fish through smoking. It hardened wooden tools and helped in metalworking. It was the gathering place, the social center, the place of storytelling and ritual. In Norse mythology, fire was associated with multiple deities and concepts. The hearth fire was under the protection of household spirits and female deities associated with fate and domestic well-being. The word for fire in Old Norse, eld, appears in many compound words and place names. The hearth, eld stud, was not just a physical feature, but a symbol of the household itself. To be invited to sit by someone's fire was to be welcomed as a guest. To violate that hospitality was one of the gravest offenses in Norse society. Fire was also legally significant. In many Norse law codes, letting your fire spread and cause damage was a serious offense. Conversely, deliberately extinguishing someone's fire could be a form of attack or intimidation. Practically, maintaining fire required constant work and attention. Firewood had to be cut, split, dried, and stored. In coastal areas with limited forest, this could be a significant challenge. Peat, dried seaweed, and even dried animal dung might be used to supplement wood. Fire starting without modern matches was labor-intensive. The most common method involved striking flint against iron pyrite or steel, creating sparks that fell onto tinder. This required dry tinder, steady hands, and patience. This is why keeping the fire alive overnight was so important. It saved the work of rekindling each morning. The person who woke and tended the fire was performing a crucial service to the household. Now, with the fire reawakened, let us see how the rest of the household begins to stir. Chapter 4. Dawn in the Longhouse. Waking the household. One by one, the others wake. The process is gradual, organic, not marked by alarm clocks or strict schedules. The household rises because the day requires it, because work must be done, because there is light and warmth now where there was cold and darkness before. A boy of about 10 sits up, rubbing his eyes. He sleeps near his parents in a relatively warm spot. He is at an age of transition, no longer a small child who needs constant care, but not yet old enough to take on the full work of an adult. He pulls his cloak tighter around his shoulders against the early chill. Even with the fire reawakening, the hall takes time to warm. Cold air has settled during the night, pooling in corners and along the floor. At the far end of the hall, near the animal partition, a dog lifts its head. Dogs were common on Viking Age farms. They served as guardians, warning of strangers or predators. They helped with herding sheep and cattle, and they were companions, particularly for children. The dog in our story is a medium-sized animal, something like a modern Norwegian elkhound or Icelandic sheepdog. It has thick fur, pricked ears, and a curled tail. It sleeps where it chooses, tolerated everywhere because it is useful. It yawns, showing white teeth, then trots over to lie down near the hearth, pushing its nose close to the warmth. The woman tending the fire reaches out absently and scratches behind its ears. The dog closes its eyes in contentment. The farmer, the Bondi, wakes next. This word Bondi is important. It literally means one who dwells, but it carries connotations of land ownership, independence, and social standing. A Bondi was a free farmer, not noble but not landless. He owned or had rights to the land he worked. Our farmer is in his 30s or 40s. This is the prime of life for a Viking Age man, old enough to have experience and established position, young enough to have strength. His face is weathered by sun and wind. His hands are calloused from years of labor. His beard is long enough to be practical, perhaps reaching mid-chest, and braided to keep it out of his way during work. Grooming was taken seriously. Combs, often made of antler or bone and intricately decorated, are among the most common finds in Viking graves. He rises, stretching stiff muscles. Sleep on a wooden platform, even with blankets and furs, is not as comfortable as a modern bed. Backs ache, joints crack, but this is normal, expected. He reaches for his clothes, which he has kept near him during the night. He pulls on a linen undershirt, the fabric rough-woven but serviceable. Over this goes a woolen tunic, reaching to mid-thigh. The wool is thick, tightly woven to resist wind and wet. His belt is a leather strap with a bronze buckle, functional and essential, holding his knife, a small pouch, and possibly a fire steel. Over the tunic, he dons a woolen cloak, fastened with a simple penannular brooch at the right shoulder, leaving the dominant arm free. His shoes are similar to the woman's, single-piece leather wraparound shoes. Indoors, they suffice. Outdoors, he would switch to fur-lined boots. As more people wake and dress, the longhouse fills with the sounds of morning. Feet pad across wooden floors, blankets are folded and stacked. Children whisper to each other, their voices still soft with sleep. The animals in the byre grow louder now, sensing that the day has begun. Cattle low, asking to be fed. Sheep bleat. The sounds carry through the partition into the main hall. Someone opens the main door, just a crack, letting in a slice of cold, bright light. The contrast makes everyone squint. Snow reflects brilliant white. The sky above is pale blue, clear after the storm. The door is quickly closed again. Too much cold air rushing in will make the warming process take longer. But that brief glimpse confirmed what everyone hoped. The storm has passed. The world outside, though buried in snow, is calm. Now the woman who rekindled the fire begins to prepare the morning meal. There will be no fresh bread today. The grain stock is precious in winter, and baking requires significant effort. Instead, breakfast is a simple affair. Leftover porridge, reheated in a clay or soapstone pot hung over the fire, and dried fish soaked in water the night before. Porridge was made from barley or oats, both crops well suited to the cool, short summers of Scandinavia. Grains were stored in pits or clay-lined granaries and consumed carefully over the long winter months. Salted, dried or smoked fish provided vital protein during the winter. Cod, herring, and scythe were common catches along the Norwegian coast. They were split, dried on racks, and stored in cool dry rooms. Stockfish could last for years. She stirs the pot slowly, the smell of grain and salt mingling with wood smoke. Wooden bowls and spoons are passed around. These vessels, often turned on a lathe or carved by hand, are personal items. Most people owned their own eating utensils, which they carried with them, even when traveling. The meal is eaten quickly, with little ceremony. People sit where they can, on benches or platforms, bowls balanced on laps. There is quiet conversation, plans for the day's work, comments about the weather, observations about how the animals sound this morning. When bowls are empty, they are set aside. There is no running water for washing. Later, they might be wiped clean with a cloth or rinsed with snow melted in a pot. For now, work calls. As the light grows, chores begin. Everyone contributes: men, women, children, thralls. Labor is divided not strictly by gender, but by ability, need, and status. Children begin with like tasks: feeding chickens if any are kept, checking water buckets, gathering dry straw for bedding or fire starting. Young boys accompany their fathers to the byre, learning how to tend to animals. Girls help with food preparation or begin learning textile work. Women often focus on textile production after morning chores, spinning wool, carding fleece, or operating the vertical warp-weighted loom. This is a standard feature in Norse households. Textile production was constant and laborious. Wool had to be spun into yarn, dyed, woven, and sewn. One tunic might take weeks of work. Men inspect fences, check for snow damage to outbuildings, and split firewood. Some prepare sleds for hauling supplies. Others inspect stored tools, sharpen blades, or mend leather gear. Thralls, if present, begin the least pleasant tasks, mucking out the animal stalls, emptying chamber pots into designated midden heaps, and bringing in water from nearby wells or streams, often through thick snow. The longhouse is never silent. Now it buzzes with daily life: the scrape of wood, the chatter of children, the lowing of cows, the occasional bark of the dog. Outside, wind pushes snow against the walls. Occasionally, the creak of timber marks the expansion and contraction of the structure as it warms. Sound was part of how people understood their world. Without clocks, people listened to the tone of the fire, the rhythm of footsteps, the calls of animals. Now that the household is fully awake, we will shift focus from the domestic sphere to explore seasonal rhythms and the inner world of the longhouse. Chapter 5: Midday in the Hall: Rhythms of Winter Life. The hours between morning and dusk pass slowly in a Viking longhouse during the deep winter. Outside, the light is cold and fleeting. By the time the sun rises fully above the horizon, it already begins its descent. There are only a few hours of usable daylight, and each one is guarded and used with care. Inside the longhouse, life moves at a quieter rhythm. The most physically demanding tasks are completed in the early morning. Now comes the time for crafts, repairs, and the work that can be done by firelight and memory. The fire burns brighter now, not out of urgency, but to light the hall and warm its wide interior. Additional logs are added, creating a long, sustained heat that radiates across the nave. Shadows flicker against the curved walls and rafters. The smoke holes remain partially open, letting light shafts pierce the haze and reveal the slow dance of dust and ash. Crafts dominate the midday hours. A man works at a small bench near one of the posts, carving a wooden ladle from a split birch log. The handle is already shaped, and now he refines the bowl with a crooked knife. Each motion is practiced, deliberate. Another shapes a pair of skates from the leg bones of cattle. The bones are polished, drilled, and grooved. When tied to the bottom of leather shoes, they allow the wearer to glide across frozen lakes. Bone skates are found in multiple archaeological sites across Scandinavia, evidence of both necessity and ingenuity. Nearby, an older woman cards wool, combing it with paddle-shaped tools to align the fibers. Once smoothed, she spins it into yarn using a drop spindle. The motion is hypnotic, the spindle twirling as her fingers draw out the thread. The vertical loom stands near the wall, its warp threads weighted with stones or clay weights. Women work side by side, talking as they pass the weft back and forth. These hours are also when knowledge passes most easily. There is no formal schooling, no books, no writing for most. Knowledge is shared through repetition, example, and correction. A boy sharpens a knife under the watchful eye of his uncle. A girl learns the stitch to bind the hem of a tunic. An elder demonstrates how to twist a leather thong strong enough to hold a bundle of firewood. Children imitate, ask questions, listen to corrections, and watch closely. There is no difference between learning and doing. They are the same act. Mastery is judged by results, not tests. This is also when stories are told, not the grand myths, but household stories. Family tales. Who built the boat stored under the tarpaulin? Who caught the bear 2 winters ago? Which ancestor's blade hangs above the hearth? These stories bind generations together, keeping memory alive as part of daily labor. As the afternoon approaches, another round of chores begin. The byre must be checked again, manure removed, bedding fluffed, feed distributed. A thin layer of hay is spread for the cattle, who chew slowly, their massive bodies gently steaming in the cold air. Someone steps outside to watch the sky. The clouds are changing. Low and grey in the morning, now they scatter in long streaks of silver and pearl. The wind has shifted. These signs mean something. To a Norse farmer, reading the sky is as important as understanding tools. It tells you when the freeze will deepen, when a thaw might come, or when the next snow will fall. Back inside, preparations begin for the afternoon meal. It will not be large. A stew made from dried fish with perhaps some root vegetables, turnips or parsnips, if any remain. Salt is added sparingly. Meals are functional, not feasts. Sustenance for survival. Chapter 6. Dusk and the Coming of Night. The short northern day ends swiftly. By mid-afternoon, the light begins to fail. The sun lowers behind the hills, throwing long blue shadows across the snow. Inside the longhouse, candles are lit, small cups filled with tallow with twisted woolen wicks. Their light is flickering and soft. Candles are precious. Made from animal fat rendered over many hours, they burn quickly and must be used wisely. Oil lamps carved from soapstone provide steadier light, though they too require fuel. The fire in the hearth remains the dominant source of illumination. The family gathers close to the fire. The flickering light reflects in eyes, highlights fur collars, and catches on the edges of bronze and bone jewelry. The longhouse begins to feel like a single breath, drawn in and held together by warmth and light. As the light fades outside, the pattern inside the hall tightens. Work tools are put away. Shavings are swept with bunches of twigs toward the edges of the floor. The long central hearth becomes not just the source of warmth and light, but the axis around which the social order of the household will now arrange itself. The evening meal is the main gathering of the day. It is when everyone, from the Bondi to the youngest child and the humblest farmhand, is present in the same space with a common purpose. Along one side of the hall stands the high seat, the place of honor. It is not a throne in a royal sense, but a marked and respected position. A slightly raised section along the bench, sometimes with carved posts at either end, sometimes with decorative panels or special textiles hung behind. Here the farmer sits, often with his spouse beside him, facing the length of the hall and the doorway. Important guests, if any are present, are seated near the high seat. Kin and trusted followers fill the benches nearest them. Farther down, toward the doors and the byre, sit servants, hired workers, and those who tend the fields. Seating is not casual. It reflects rights, obligations, and honour. To be moved closer to the high seat is a sign of favour. To be pushed away from it is a quiet humiliation. The food is simple but filling. Stew is ladled from a large iron or soapstone pot that hangs from an adjustable chain or sits on stones in the hottest part of the hearth. It is thickened with grain and flavoured with whatever the season allows. Dried herbs from bundles hung in the rafters, bits of onion or leek from carefully kept winter stores, maybe a piece of preserved meat saved from the slaughter season. Each person has their own wooden bowl and spoon. These are passed down, repaired and treasured. A knife at the belt serves as both tool and eating utensil. Bread, when present, is coarse and dark, made from barley, oats or rye. In deep winter, there may be days when there is no bread at all, only porridge and stew. You can hear the sounds of eating now, the clink of wood against wood, the quiet slurp of hot broth, the low murmur of voices. There is no clatter of metal cutlery or ceramic plates. Wood, leather and stone absorb sound. The hall feels cocooned, hushed, despite the presence of so many bodies. Drink in winter is mostly water, whey or weak ale. Strong ale or mead is reserved for special occasions and religious rites. Tonight is an ordinary night, marked only by the weather outside. A tub of thin ale is brought forth and each adult is given a portion. Children drink watered ale or buttermilk. Alcohol is not an escape here, but a measure of calories and safety. Water kept in wooden buckets can freeze or become fouled. Fermented drink lasts longer and is safer to consume. After the main hunger is satisfied, the mood in the hall loosens. People lean back against the walls or against rolled-up bedding. Cloaks are pulled tighter or draped over shoulders. The dog settles near the fire, snout on its paws, one ear still cocked for unfamiliar sounds. The heat from the hearth has now soaked into the fabric of the house. Roof beams creak softly as they expand. The turf on the roof insulates, keeping the warmth in and the wind out. Even in a hard climate, and even with the constant press of work, there is room for play. After the evening meal, when chores are done, and before sleep claims the household, these are the hours when games and music emerge. On a low board near the fire, two men sit facing each other over a game of Nefertal, a strategy game played with carved pieces of bone, antler or wood. The board is divided into squares. One player commands a central king piece and a smaller force, the other commands a larger force around the edges. The goal is to trap or escape. Around them, children watch, whispering predictions, learning the patterns of attack and defense. This is more than diversion. It is mental training in tactics, patience and foresight. Music, too, belongs to these hours. Somewhere near the fire, a small lyre or harp is lifted from its place on a peg. Its sound box is carved from a single piece of wood, hollowed out and fitted with a thin wooden top. Gut strings are plucked with fingers or a small plectrum. The notes are bright but gentle in the smoky air. Someone might have a bone flute or a jaw harp that twangs with a buzzing, rhythmic pulse when held against the teeth and plucked. The music is not concert-like, not a performance in the modern sense. It drifts through talk, rises and falls as people join or leave, a shared background to the slow unwinding of the day. Now the hall turns inward in another way. With bellies warm and hands loosely occupied, spinning, mending, carving, ears turn toward the person who begins to speak in a different tone. A story is starting. You might imagine an older man or an older woman clearing their throat, waiting just long enough for the chatter to settle. The children know the rhythm of this pause. They go quiet. Even the dog lifts its head for a heartbeat before settling again. The stories told in such halls are varied. Some are local and recent, the winter when the roof nearly collapsed from snow. the year the fjord did not freeze and the seals came in great numbers, the time a neighbor's cow broke loose and had to be chased all the way to the shore. Others reach farther back to the deeds of ancestors who cleared this land, who built the first house here, who sailed west or east and returned with strange goods and stranger tales. And then there are the mythic stories, the ones about the gods and giants, the creation of the world, the end of the world, and the spaces in between. You can hear, in your imagination, the familiar names rolling through the smoky air. Odin, wise and one-eyed. Thor, strong and storm-hearted, friend of farmers. Freya and Freya, bringers of fertility. Loki, clever and dangerous. These tales are not recited exactly the same way each time. They are reshaped, expanded, shortened, embellished, according to the skill and mood of the storyteller and the needs of the audience. In later centuries, some of these tales will be written down in poems and prose that scholars will study. For now, they live only as breath and memory, carried on the air of halls like this one. Religion in this world does not live far away in large temples only. It is woven into the daily fabric of household life. Near the high seat, you may imagine a small area that is treated with particular respect. A carved figure, perhaps no higher than a person's hand, stands on a simple shelf or beam. It might be a stylized representation of a god, or it might be more abstract, a symbol of the household's protective spirits. On certain nights, at the start of winter, at midwinter, or when luck needs to be called back, a small portion of food or drink is set aside before anyone eats. A sip of ale is poured near the fire. A piece of meat or bread is placed quietly by the household shrine or near the threshold. These are gifts for the unseen powers, the land spirits, the ancestors, the gods. The line between custom and formal worship is not sharply drawn here. To live on this land, through these winters, people feel themselves in relationship with forces both natural and unseen. Tonight, as the wind outside grows stronger, someone glances toward the small sacred place near the high seat and, without fuss, adds a pinch of salt and a crumb of bread. No formal words are necessary. The act itself is the prayer. The hours move on. One by one, people's hands slow in their tasks. The spindle's whirling lessens and stops. The knife is wiped clean and placed in its sheath. The game pieces are gathered into a small leather bag. The harp is hung back on its peg. Children are the first to be sent to sleep. They curl up on the benches under layers of wool and fur, still half listening as adult voices begin to drop into lower, more private tones. Practical preparations for the night begin. The fire, which blazed high during the evening gathering, is now carefully managed. Too large a fire wastes precious wood and can be dangerous while people sleep. Too small, and the hall will grow bitterly cold before morning. Logs are shifted. The outermost embers are raked inward. A larger log, oak or dense pine if available, is placed so that it will burn slowly. Then ash is gently pulled over parts of the glowing coals, dimming their light but preserving their heat. The smoke holes are adjusted. If the wind is fierce, the shutters may be partly closed, prioritizing warmth over clear air. The hall becomes darker, more enclosed. Smoke thickens for a time, then settles into a familiar haze. At the byre end, animals shift in their stalls. Fresh bedding laid earlier in the day rustles under hooves. A cow exhales a long, slow breath. The smell of warm animal bodies mixes with the sense of wool, smoke, and aged wood. Before the last of the adults lie down, there is a quiet conversation about the night. Will anyone stay semi-awake to tend the fire and listen for danger? Tonight, the main concern is the weather. The wind has grown louder, a constant moan around the corners of the building, rising at intervals into a high whistle as it squeezes through cracks and over the roof ridge. One of the younger adults, still full of energy, offers to sleep nearest the hearth and wake if the fire burns too low or if the shutters bang open. This is not a formal guard duty, but a shared responsibility. One by one, voices fade. The last log shifts with a small shower of sparks, a final adjustment of a blanket, a whispered goodnight. Then, for a time, only the breathing of the house remains. Soon, the storm outside will rise to its full voice. The longhouse will creak and sigh like a ship on a black sea. But for now, you are inside it, carried safely, held in the slow, steady rhythm of a winter night. Chapter 7. The Storm in the Night. The storm does not arrive all at once. It grows like a living thing, testing the hall before it commits its full strength. At first, there is only the low moan of wind against the turf-covered roof and the wooden gables, a sound that rises and falls like distant surf. Now and then, a stronger gust leans its weight against the long side of the building, making the walls creak and the roof timbers answer with a slow, deep groan. The longhouse moves, but it does not give way. Its frame is built to flex, not to stand rigid. A stiff, brittle structure would crack. This one bends. Outside, snow is driven hard across the yard and over the fields, piling in drifts behind every obstacle. The boathouses at the shore take the full force of the wind, their low shapes half buried already. Inside, the storm is a presence more felt than seen. The fire throws up small fountains of sparks when a gust pulls air through unseen cracks. Smoke swirls, then presses downward, then is drawn up again. On the benches, in the half-dark, people turn in their sleep as the storm finds its voice. One child mutters and burrows deeper under a sheepskin. An older man, long used to such nights, opens his eyes for a moment, listens, judges the sound of the wind, and lets his eyes slide closed again. This is a kind of sleep unfamiliar to many in later centuries, not the absolute darkness and silence of an isolated bedroom, but a layered, communal dozing. People sink and rise in cycles of light sleep, always in quiet contact with the world around them. A woman closest to the hearth wakes as a stronger gust sends a small shower of soot down from the rafters. She coughs once, lifts herself up on an elbow, and looks toward the banked fire. A few of the ash-covered coals have broken free, glimmering faintly red. She listens. The storm's voice has changed now, less like a distant moan and more like a constant, thick rush. Somewhere under that noise, she can still pick out familiar sounds, the rustle and stamp of the cattle in the byre, the occasional sleepy cluck of a chicken disturbed on its perch. She adjusts the blanket of ash slightly over the coals with a stick, more from habit than necessity, then lies down again, pulling the furs up to her chin. Her thoughts dissolve back toward sleep, even as the wind's fingers drum insistently on the roof above. Listen again to the sounds inside the longhouse. With the wind howling around the walls and the roof beams groaning, the hall feels almost like a beached ship riding out a storm. This comparison is not only poetic. The structural kinship between ships and hulls runs deep. The curved ribs of the roof, the overlapping planks, the way the whole frame is meant to flex, these are techniques refined in shipbuilding and adapted here to a life on land. In your imagination, you can feel the hull heave slightly under each gust, as if it were riding a slow, invisible wave. The central hearth becomes the ship's heartfire. The posts on either side are like masts. The benches along the walls are like the thwarts where rowers would sit. Out beyond the walls, the storm is an endless sea of dark and cold. Inside, the household lies together like a crew. The sense of being carried, of being enclosed in a wooden shell while chaos rages outside, is part of what allows most of the sleepers to rest. The storm is big, but the hall is solid. It has stood through many winters already. Storms, like all things, pass. The turning point is not always marked by a clear signal, but by a slow change in tone. Sometime in the deep night, the wind begins to tire. Its sharpest gusts dull a little. The constant roar drops by a small degree, enough that the background sounds inside the hall come forward again. A deep snore from the buyer end, the soft rustle of someone shifting position, the quiet crackle of a new pocket of resin catching in the embers. Across the roof, instead of constant hissing, snow now falls in softer, intermittent bursts as the clouds break and reform.
In the spaces between, the sky above the fjord clears. Stars emerge, hard and bright in the freezing air. By the time the first signs of dawn begin to touch the sky, the storm has spent most of its force. It leaves behind deep drifts, glazed ice, and a world reshaped. But the hall still stands, its roof intact, its hearth alive under its blanket of ash. Chapter 8: The Morning After, a world remade by snow. Morning comes more quietly than the night that preceded it. As on the day before, the first movement in the longhouse is the stirring of the woman who tends the hearth. After a night of half-sleep, ears tuned to the rise and fall of the storm, her joints ache more than usual. Her breath hangs white as she crosses to the hearth. Beneath the grey blanket of ash, the coals are still alive. When she rakes the ash back, faint red glows deepen to orange. With practiced hands, she feeds the coals dry splinters and kindling. Thin tongues of flame catch, grow, and begin to throw a small circle of gold into the dim hall. Only when the hall feels a little less bitter does the farmer rise and move toward the main door. Even before he reaches it, he can tell from the muffled feel of his footsteps that snow has piled high outside. He lifts the heavy bar, braces his shoulder against the wood, and pushes. At first, the door barely moves. Packed snow resists like stone. He leans again, harder. Wood creaks, snow grinds. At last, with a low, gritty sigh, the door gives, opening a hand's breadth, then a little more, spilling fine, dry crystals into the threshold. The first sight beyond is a wall of white. Once the gap is widened enough, the farmer and another adult squeeze out sideways into the transformed morning. The farm is still there, but softened and altered. The yard is filled with smooth, rounded shapes, where tools, firewood stacks, and low walls once showed their angles clearly. Fences appear as a series of even bumps, their posts capped with thick, rounded heaps of snow. Above, the sky is clear and thin, a hard winter blue. The air is so still that every sound, the crunch of boots, a distant crow, seems sharpened. Down toward the fjord, the shoreline has become a broad band of snow and ice. The water itself glints dark beyond a jumble of broken ice, slabs pushed and piled by the storm, now frozen again into jagged formations. For a moment, the two adults simply stand at the edge of the path they've carved and look. Their eyes move carefully over roof lines, posts, and trees, searching for sagging beams, fallen trunks, anything that speaks of real damage. They see strain and weight, but no collapse. Relief loosens something tight inside them. The moment of stillness passes. The storm has left behind work. First comes the path from the longhouse door to the byre. Snow is shoveled aside with broad wooden blades, the edges scraping the compacted layers below. Where drifts climb too high to clear fully at once, they are trampled, pressed down by many boots into firm tracks. Children old enough to help join in, breath puffing around their heads as they push and stamp. Younger ones peer from the doorway, half eager, half wary. At the byre door, more snow must be cut away before the timbers will swing open. The animals inside are noisy now, lowing, bleating, shifting hooves on bedding that has grown damp and trampled through the night. When the doors finally open, a wave of warm, animal-scented air rolls out. Cattle blink in the sudden light.
Sheep crowd together, wool steaming faintly in the chill. Manure is forked aside. Fresh hay is spread in rustling layers. Water troughs are checked. Thin ice on the surface is broken with the butt of a tool or a heavy stick. After the byre, attention turns to the smaller buildings, barns, sheds, boathouses. With long-handled poles and rakes, adults knock snow from eaves and ridges. It slides away in slow, heavy sheets, falling with soft thumps that echo through the crisp air. By late morning, the most urgent tasks are complete. Paths now thread between doors, narrow trenches of compacted snow, their walls almost as high as a child's shoulders in places. Roofs have been relieved of their deepest burdens. Inside the byre, animals eat more calmly. Back in the hall, faces reddened from cold and effort, the farmer and his wife sit close to the fire with bowls of hot broth. This is the moment to assess. They speak in low tones about what the storm has taken and what it has spared. One fence corner lies broken under the weight of drifted snow. The post was old and rotten anyway. A small shed has shifted slightly on its stone foundation. Not a crisis, but a warning. They turn their thoughts to stores. How many sacks of grain remain sealed? How many slabs of dried fish hang in the rafters? How many sides of smoked meat are left? Nothing is yet dire, but the margin is thin. A few more storms like this, or an illness among the animals, could tilt balance in the wrong direction. When their bowls are empty, another concern presses forward. Neighbours. No farm lives entirely alone along this fjord. Up valley and around the next headlands, other households sit under their own layers of snow, facing the same storms, feeding their own fires. After a night like the one they have just endured, it feels wrong not to know how those others have fared. The farmer decides to send a small party to the nearest farm, just beyond a low ridge out of sight. He chooses one younger adult and an older boy to go with him. 3 together are safer on winter paths than one alone. They dress carefully. Layered woolen garments, cloaks pinned tight, mittens or skin hand wraps, hoods pulled low. Staffs are taken for balance and for probing unknown depths of drift and ice. They also carry a small bundle of food, dried fish, perhaps a piece of bread. It is a simple gift, a way of saying, "We had enough to check on you." The rest of the household stands in the doorway and watches as the small group follows the newly broken path, then turns and disappears behind the white swell of a drift. In the early afternoon, the 3 who went to the neighboring farm return. From the hall doorway, their silhouettes are small against the brightness, but posture and pace tell much. They walk steadily, not running in panic, not laboring under obvious bad news. Their news is, on the whole, good. The neighbor's main hall stands firm. One small shed lost a strip of thatch under the weight of snow and will need repair, but the walls held. No one was injured in the night. One sheep was lost, found smothered in a deep drift near a stone wall, but the rest of the flock is safe. The small gift of dried fish and bread has been left behind and accepted. In return, the neighbor sent a token of their own, a piece of smoked meat, more about mutual respect than necessity. These exchanges reinforce something crucial. In hardship, people check on one another. Today's gesture may be repaid in a future year, when fortune tilts and help moves the other way. As the light thins and the warmth of the fire deepens, work gives way to talk. Already, the storm is turning into a story. Around the hearth, people recount the night in their own ways. One highlights the sounds, the longhouse creaking like a ship, the shrill whine of wind, the boom of snow dropping from the roof. Another describes the feeling when the door first refused to move in the morning. Children add their own fragments, the sudden swirl of soot when a gust forced smoke downward, the way the rafters seemed to hum. Someone mentions a dream from that night, walking through a world of snow with no landmarks, unable to tell where the farm began or ended. In telling and retelling, the household fixes the event in shared memory. The storm is no longer just a private fear in the dark, it becomes a shape that can be turned over, examined, even laughed about in small ways. The night that follows is almost unnaturally calm. Outside, the wind has fallen completely. The cold is sharp but steady. Inside, the fire is managed lower than it was at the height of the storm. There is no need to fight invisible hands beating on the walls. Bodies are tired in a different way than after a day of indoor winter work. Muscles ache from shoveling, climbing onto roofs, tramping through deep drifts. It is honest exhaustion. Before sleep takes them fully, a few people murmur brief thanks to gods, to land spirits, to simple luck, that the roof held, that kin and neighbors still live, that animals stand on their feet. One by one, voices fade. The whole quiets to the soft breath of sleepers, the occasional stamp of a hoof in the byre, the faint rustle of embers shifting under ash. The Longhouse rests in a remade world, a warm oval of wood, wool, and living bodies, surrounded on all sides by deep, reflective snow. Chapter 9. Another winter day. Trade, talk, and ties. The next winter day begins much like the last. In the dim half-light before dawn, the woman who tends the fire rises from her bench. The air is cold on her face as she pushes aside her blankets. She moves by habit. Kneel by the hearth, pull back the ash, search for the faint, buried glow of coals. There they are, small and sullen, but alive. She feeds them dry splinters and kindling, leans close, and breathes out steady, patient gusts of air. The coals brighten, flames appear, then strengthen. Light grows slowly in the longhouse. One by one, others wake. The same boy rubs sleep from his eyes, the same dog stretches and pads towards the fire. The farmer sits up and reaches for his belt and knife. Yet beneath this familiar pattern, the mood is not quite the same. Yesterday was about surviving the storm and understanding what it had done. Today, thoughts drift more often towards things beyond the farm: trade, law, assemblies, future marriages, and ties. As people eat their simple morning porridge, conversation starts to wander further than the fields outside. Names of distant places surface: market towns along the coast, an inland settlement at the head of a long valley, the site of the regional thing. Later in the morning, the farmer goes to a wooden chest set near the high seat. It is not an ordinary storage chest for everyday tools. The wood is heavier, the iron binding sturdier. It does not hold treasure in the sense of kings, but in the sense of farmers, things that are not used every day, but which tie the whole to the larger world. A child hovers nearby, curious. At a small nod from his father, he is allowed to lift the lid. Inside lies a careful jumble of uncommon objects. There is a small balance scale, its beam of bronze, with delicate arms and 2 pans. Beside it sits a pouch of weights, small bits of metal and stone. With these, silver can be weighed, and valuable goods can be judged fairly in trade. Nearby is a narrow band of cloth more finely woven than the wool that wraps the benches. Its pattern is intricate, its colours deeper. It waits for a special purpose, as part of a bride's outfit perhaps, or a gift to seal an agreement. There is also a small leather bag that clinks faintly when lifted. Inside, fragmented silver, pieces of arm rings, clipped coins, and cut ingots. Some pieces bear traces of foreign designs. The silver is memory-made metal, each scrap the remnant of a trade or deal somewhere along the routes that touch this fjord. For the child peering in, these things feel almost magical. They are proof that the world is wider than the snowy slopes and the dark hall. With the chest open, stories arise naturally. the farmer begins to speak, not in the tone of myth or legend, but in the simple, steady voice of remembered experience. He tells of a trading voyage some years ago. A handful of men from this district sailed south along the coast, following headland after headland until the familiar angles of their own fjord were lost behind them. He describes the sea, how some days it rolled gently and on others it slapped the hull with short, hard waves. He recalls the nights when they pulled the boat ashore and slept under a tilted hull or a stretched sail. He speaks of the harbour where they finally made landfall, of a shoreline crowded with boats, of the smell of tar, fish, smoke, and many bodies, of people from different districts and islands, their accents slightly strange. He describes stalls and booths where foreign goods were laid out, bright glass beads, fine metal brooches carved with curling animal forms, lengths of cloth in colours richer than anything woven in this small hall. In exchange, men from this fjord offered what they had: bundles of stockfish, cured hides, perhaps walrus tusk or furs from further north. Silver passed from hand to hand. Promises were made for future deliveries or joint ventures. To the children listening, these images are almost like tales of another world. But to the adults, the story is both distant and practical. It is a reminder that this small farm is plugged into currents of trade reaching far beyond the fjord. Later, when wool is being spun and tools are being checked by the fire, talk slides from trade to law. Not the law of kings in distant centres, but the law as it is known here, spoken, remembered, and acted out in homes and on assembly fields. Near the hearth, two men discuss the stone that marks part of the boundary between this farm and another further up the slope. After the heavy snows, the stone is tilted and half buried. When the thaw comes, it will need to be set straight. They speak of what should happen if there is disagreement. An older man begins to recite, almost without thinking, the proper steps for resolving such disputes. How witnesses should be called, how a claim should be announced, how oaths can be sworn, how compensation might be agreed. There is no law book here, no written code hanging on a wall. The law lives in heads and tongues, in the memories of those who have stood in the thing circle, listened to the law speaker, and seen actual cases settled. As the day repeats its cycles, chores, repairs, food, and rest, the older people in the hall drift into memories of past assemblies. They speak of things held on grassy slopes in summer, when the earth was green and the air alive with the smell of trampled plants under many feet. They describe hillsides crowded with men in cloaks, women in layered dresses and brooches, children darting between them. They remember the law speaker standing in a marked place, raising his voice to call out portions of the law so that everyone could hear, not reading but reciting from memory. Around that formal centre, they recall the knots of people talking, some negotiating compensation for old wrongs, some arranging marriages, some trading fish for cloth or iron tools for hides, some simply catching up on births, deaths, and repairs across the region. They tell of a year when a dispute over grazing almost became a severe conflict, until older, more respected men stepped between the parties. A compromise was hammered out. They also remember a man who refused the judgment of the assembly, stormed away, and in the seasons that followed found fewer invitations to feasts and fewer hands willing to help when he needed assistance. For the younger ones listening, these stories are education. They learn that the Thing is not only a place of arguments, but also a place of weaving networks, agreements, reputations, and futures. In the softer light of late afternoon, a different topic emerges: marriage. Winter is a time made for such conversations. The land is resting under snow, long evenings stretch ahead. Near the high seat, the farmer and his wife speak quietly with a visiting kinsman. Their voices are low, but some phrases drift through the room. Names of farms, names of families, hints of dowry and land. They discuss a young woman of good reputation from a neighbouring household. She can manage a buyer well, her weaving is praised, her kin are steady.
They also speak of a young man, perhaps the farmer's son, perhaps a close kinsman who could be a possible match. Marriage here is not mainly a private romance. It is a carefully judged alliance between households. Land, goods, reputation, and practical skills all matter. None of this is fully decided tonight, but the fact that people are speaking these names aloud, fitting them together in different ways, means that possibilities are forming. As darkness gathers outside, the longhouse returns to its well-known evening shape. The fire in the central hearth is fed until it burns long and steady. Shadows jump on the smoke-dark beams. The evening meal is simple but filling. People take their places along the benches. No one needs to be told where to sit. The arrangement is known and accepted. After eating, hands reach for familiar tasks. Someone brings out the hnefetaf board. Another continues spinning wool. A child quietly practices carving. Stories rise again, as they always do when the day's work is done. Tonight, the favoured tales are not of gods or giants, but of journeys and meetings. Of the time a merchant from further south overwintered at a larger farm and brought news of markets. Of a summer when the thing was particularly crowded. Of a marriage that linked this fjord to another far along the coast. Children drift towards sleep, heads nodding, their minds filled with images of crowded assembly fields, foreign coins, and longhouses like their own scattered along distant shores. The fire is eventually banked, ash is drawn over embers, cloaks are pulled up. The longhouse settles, once more, into layered breathing and warmth. This day has seen no battle, no raid, no grand feat. Yet within its quiet hours, the threads of trade, law, assemblies, and marriage have all been drawn through the life of the hall. Chapter 10. Visitors in Winter, Hospitality and Honor. Some days after the storm, a different kind of day arrives. It begins like many others, but when the main door is opened, the light outside feels sharper, almost startling. The sky is a pale, cloudless blue. The air is hard and dry, colder than on grey, snow-filled days. Every breath that leaves a mouth seems to hang in the still air longer than usual. This is a travelling day. Paths are hard enough to bear sleds. Snow bridges, small hollows and uneven ground. Those who must move in winter, messengers, traders, kin, wait for days like this. Late in the morning, a boy sent outside to fetch wood calls back toward the door. He has seen movement along the shoreline path, small dark shapes against the bright crusted snow. Adults step into the doorway, squinting as their eyes adjust to the glare. There, in the middle distance, 3 figures move steadily along the curve of the fjord. Cloaks snap lightly in the dry wind. One of them leans into a rope, pulling a small sled behind. Visitors. In winter, unexpected footprints on a path mean more than casual calling. To walk any distance through snow and cold demands purpose. The farmer and his wife stand a little apart from the door as the visitors approach the yard. The dog, sensing their presence, barks sharply, then shifts to a low growl before quieting under a soft command. At the edge of the cleared space, the travellers stop. They stamp packed snow from their boots. Cloaks are given a shake. Now, at this closer distance, recognition settles in. The man is a kinsman from a farm further along the fjord. The woman is his wife. The younger person is their eldest child. Short greetings are exchanged. Names are spoken aloud, even though they are already known. Then comes the important moment, crossing the threshold. The doorway is not just a gap in the wall, it is a line between worlds, the cold, indifferent outside and the warm, ordered inside. To step over it as a guest, under peaceful terms, is to enter into a web of rights and duties that all recognize. Once the visitors duck through the low opening and the door is pulled shut behind them, they are no longer simply travelers, they are guests and must be treated as such. In this hall, as in many others, hospitality is not optional kindness, it is a core expectation. A person who arrives without weapons bared, without feud declared, under the ordinary codes of peace, must be offered warmth, food, and a measure of safety. To refuse such hospitality without grave cause is to stain one's name. The visitors shrug off snow-dusted cloaks and step closer to the fire. Their hands tremble slightly with chill as they stretch them out toward the flames. The household moves into the practiced dance of receiving guests. Wooden cups are quickly filled, warm whey or ale, whatever is at hand. Food follows. The midday meal, whatever it was going to be, is stretched. Stew is laddered into extra bowls. Bread is divided into more smaller pieces. No one, at first, asks directly why they have come. The immediate needs of cold bodies and empty stomachs are seen to first. When hands are warm and the sharp edge of hunger has been dulled, talk begins to flow more freely. The visiting kinsman leans forward over his bowl and begins to speak of what lies beyond the next bends of the fjord. He brings news of people and events that have unfolded out of sight but not out of reach. On one farm, an older man lies ill with a lingering sickness. His strength rises and falls, and there is concern over whether he will live to see the spring planting. On another holding, a predator, likely a hungry wolf, has taken several sheep from an outer pasture. In a boat shed near a more exposed stretch of shoreline, shifting ice damaged a small vessel. The hull was cracked, but the boat was pulled out before the worst of the storm. Repairs are planned for the first mild days. Not all the news is grim. There is word of a small trader overwintering at a more central farm down the fjord. A man who carries iron tools, better quality textiles, and perhaps a small store of foreign drink. When the roads ease, he may be persuaded to visit smaller holes in turn. There are also mutterings about the regional chieftain, his recent journeys, who he has met, and whom he has favored at feasts or assemblies. Rumors of talk about kings, about Christianity, about changes in who holds power, travel along the same paths as more practical news. In this hole, such distant matters are listened to with care. People weigh how they might reach into their own lives. For now, the storm that reshapes this household most is still the weather, but they feel other winds beginning to stir. Guests, especially kin, do not arrive empty-handed. When the first sweep of talk and warming is done, the visiting man reaches for the small bundle that had ridden on the sled. He opens it with deliberate care, revealing a length of homespun wool cloth. He offers it with a few simple words: acknowledgement of kinship, thanks for past kindness, a hope that the bond between their households will remain firm. The farmer accepts the gift just as carefully. He turns the cloth in his hands, feeling its weight and the evenness of its weave. He comments on its quality, its usefulness. No one needs to say aloud what everyone understands. Gifts ask for gifts in return. Not immediately, like a trade, but eventually. Later that day or the next, the host may bring out something to balance the exchange. Perhaps a carved wooden bowl, a good tool head, or a skin of well-brewed ale. These gestures form a quiet ledger, one written not in ink, but in memory. As the short winter day tilts toward dusk, it is clear that the visitors will stay the night. To send them back out into the thickening cold would be against every rule of hospitality. The benches along the walls are adjusted. Bedding is shifted to make room. Some members of the household move willingly closer to the buyer end, yielding warmer spots to the guests. An ordinary evening becomes something more. With bellies filled and hands moving through familiar tasks, the whole turns into a space of shared storytelling that now spans more miles. The host family tells tales that show their resilience, how they managed the recent storm, how a roof beam was strengthened just in time. The visiting family answers with stories of their own, recounting how they repaired a failing barn wall, describing an especially good fishing run the previous summer. Children of both households sit together now, guarded by the comfortable nearness of many adults.
Initial shyness gives way to whispered questions and small contests of bragging and jest. Someone suggests a game. Someone else reaches for the lyre hanging from a peg. Music rises and falls around the talk, a shared fabric of sound that turns a hard, bright winter day into a night of warmth and noise. Later, when children have yawned themselves towards sleep, the talk near the high seat shifts again. The visiting kinsman mentions in an almost offhand way that as he passed another farm some days ago, he noticed something new carved into a gatepost, a small wooden cross. This is not the first time such signs have been mentioned. Over recent years, people have heard of men who swear by the White Christ instead of the older gods, of a small church rising on a chieftain's land, of a trader who claims to be Christian. In this hall, the old ways are still followed. Offerings are still set aside for the gods and the unseen land spirits. When oaths are sworn, they are still usually sworn by the gods who have long watched over fields and ships. Yet ears are open, questions come. Do those who take this new faith still come to the thing? Do they still keep their word in the same way? The answers are incomplete. No one here has spent long hours with a priest or stood inside a church. Knowledge comes in fragments, carried by traders and travelers. Still, the presence of that carved cross on a gatepost, mentioned in the smoky light of this hall, is another small sign that the world is shifting. For now, the household listens, weighs, and then lets the conversation drift back toward more immediate concerns: the woodpile, the animals, the coming thaw. When fatigue finally settles over the hall, it is deep and even. Bedding has been rearranged so that the visiting family can sleep closer to the hearth. This is a clear sign. Guests are valued. Cloaks are hung to dry, boots placed where the heat can touch them. Weapons are set within easy reach, but not clutched tightly. Trust is extended, but no one is entirely careless. The fire is banked more gently tonight, knowing there are more bodies to warm. In the half-dark, someone might murmur a brief request for safe journeys when the time comes for parting. Someone else may add a few words of thanks. Then, gradually, the hall quiets. Outside, the night is as cold and still as a blade. Inside, under one long roof, two related households lie close, joined for these brief hours by shared stories, shared food, and shared rest. By mid-morning tomorrow, the visitors will likely shoulder their packs again and step out over the threshold into the white bright world. They will carry away with them the memory of this hall, and this hall will keep its memory of them. A new joke, the way the kinsman played a tune on the lyre, the news of crosses on gateposts and traders overwintering down the fjord. Even deep in winter, when snow lies high and storms batter the roof, the Longhouse is not cut off. With every guest who crosses its threshold, the wider world steps briefly inside. Chapter 11. Toward the Edge of Winter, Restless Plans. Winter does not end with a single dramatic moment. It loosens its grip gradually, through small, almost hesitant changes. Weeks have passed since the great storm and the visit from kin. The days are still short, but light now lingers a little longer in the afternoons. When the farmer pushes open the door at dawn, he finds that the sky has shifted from the deep indigo of midwinter to a paler blue. Snow still lies thick across the fields, but its surface is different. In the faint warmth of midday, the top layer softens slightly, then freezes again at night, forming a thin, sparkling crust. The people in the Longhouse feel the change in their bodies. The cold is still biting, yet less absolute. Fingers thaw faster after work outside. The air carries a new smell, just a hint of wet earth from places where the snow has thinned over dark stones. Inside, work continues, but there is a new kind of talk threaded through it. Mentions of summer fields, of boats being tarred and caulked, of distant markets and assemblies. Down by the shoreline, a boat sleeps under winter protection. It rests on wooden rollers and a simple cradle of beams above the high tide line. In late autumn, it was pulled up with the strength of many arms and set carefully in place. Now it lies hidden under a cover of woolen sailcloth and tarred leather, with an extra layer of brush and snow drifted over it. The hull is of overlapping planks, riveted with iron nails. Its lines are long and narrow, built to move swiftly through both fjord and open coastal waters. On a clear morning, the farmer and one of his older sons make their way down to check on it. They brush away some of the snow and run their hands along the cover, feeling for any sagging or weakness. They lift one edge of the covering, just enough to peer beneath. Dim light slips in, revealing the familiar curve of the hull. The scent of tar and old salt rises. The farmer checks the fastening of the strakes with experienced fingers. He notes where the wood will need fresh tar. He does not work on it now, the cold will not accept tar well, but he is making a list in his mind for the first day that is warm and dry enough. For his son, this visit to the boat is more than maintenance. It is a promise. Running a hand along the hull, he feels again the pitch and roll of waves remembered from last season. His thoughts stretch beyond the fjord to the open sea, to market harbours. They pull the cover back into place and walk homeward. Still, the visit has done its work. The idea of future journeys has been brought closer to the fire-lit halls of winter. Back in the Longhouse, the approach of spring is felt not only in the air, but in numbers. Sitting near the hearth with a wooden tally stick, the farmer and his wife review their stores and the demands of the coming year. They speak in low voices. They count the number of cattle that must be fed until the first good grazing, the number of sheep, the amount of hay left, whether they can afford to keep all young animals or whether some must be culled for meat before winter fully ends. They consider the seed grain set aside, barley and oats that must not be touched. Those seeds are the next harvest embodied. To eat them now is to risk hunger later. They calculate what kind of surplus, if any, they will have once the new growth comes. Dried fish and stored meat might be traded. Wool and woven cloth might be bartered. The tally stick, marked with deliberate cuts along its length, holds these decisions in wood. Each notch is a memory externalized. As the tallying ends, talk turns again to the regional assembly, the spring thing. It is not yet certain when the thing will be called. Weather, local custom, and the decisions of powerful men all play a role. Still, people begin to plan who might travel, who will stay to tend the farm, and what matters should be brought before the gathering. In this hall, there are a few small disputes simmering. A boundary marker between this farm and another has long been agreed, but a recent landslide has shifted the shape of the hillside. It is not clear anymore whether a small patch of useful pasture lies within one holding or the other. For now, the farmers involved have chosen to share its use. But if either side feels wronged in years to come, memories of this winter's conversation may be brought up. There is also the matter of a young man's accidental injury. In the autumn, during cooperative work repairing a shared path, one neighbor's careless swing with an axe struck another's leg. The wound has healed, but not without pain and cost. Compensation has already been partly arranged: help with harvest, a share in firewood, perhaps a small animal biven. Yet proper procedure matters. At the thing, these agreements can be affirmed before witnesses. Around the hearth, as wool is spun and tools are mended, the older members retell past stories of things. They recall a summer when a bitter dispute over grazing rights nearly led to bloodshed, only to be settled at the last moment. They remember how one man, who refused to accept the verdict, was later shunned. These stories are not distant legends. They are practical lessons in how to live within a community where law is spoken, remembered, and enacted in public. In the midst of these preparations, talk turns to reputation,
a concept that runs like a tight thread through every aspect of Norse society. The farmer speaks to his oldest son, who may soon attend his first thing. He explains that at assemblies, people watch not just what is said, but who says it and how they stand. He tells him that a man who speaks rarely but wisely may carry more weight than one who shouts constantly. That backing down properly from a weak position is better than pushing a bad claim too far. That generosity, when possible, buys more safety than hoarding. These are not abstract lessons. The father names people they know. He points to an uncle whose words are respected because he has been consistent for years. He mentions, more cautiously, another man whose grudges have made him dangerous to cross but difficult to trust. The son listens, absorbing names and traits. In a culture without written reputational records, this shared oral mapping of character is essential. The boy asks questions. How should he respond if insulted? When is it right to let a slight pass, and when must it be answered? His father does not give simple rules. Instead, he offers examples, stories of past slights handled well or badly. As the day ends, there is a sense of anticipation in the hall. Some members of the household will soon be leaving the familiar pattern of winter days. They will take boats or sleds, follow river valleys or coastal paths, and stand among many others. Yet tonight, the usual routines hold. The evening meal is shared, the smoke coils up toward the roof, children drift towards sleep as stories are told, some now featuring assemblies and distant journeys. The small household shrine near the high seat receives a simple extra offering, a pinch of salt, a bit of bread, perhaps a quiet request for luck on the paths ahead. Then the fire is banked once more. The hall sighs into darkness. Outside, the snow gleams faintly under a thin scattering of stars. The year is turning, and the Longhouse, with all its people, turns with it. Chapter 12. On the road to the Thing, travel in late winter. When the day to depart finally comes, it has been chosen with care. Travel in late winter is always a negotiation with risk. The farmer has watched the weather closely, testing the snowpack with his staff, listening to the creak of ice. On this chosen morning, the sky is pale and high. A thin overcast filters the light, but no new snow falls. The air is cold enough that the top layer of snow remains firm underfoot. A decision is made. Today they will go. Not everyone can leave the farm. Animals must still be tended, fires maintained. A longhouse cannot simply close itself and sit empty. After discussion, it is agreed that the farmer will travel with one of his grown sons and a younger kinsman from a neighboring household. The farmer's wife remains behind to oversee the household. Her authority in his absence is unquestioned. The younger children watch this division with mixed feelings. Part of them longs to go, another part clings to the comfort of the known. Travelers and their gear do not simply step onto a cleared road. They must bring what they need. 2 sleds are brought from their storage place. They are simple but sturdy, wooden runners curved at the front, cross pieces lashed and pegged firmly. Onto the sleds go rolled bedding, woolen blankets and furs. Small sacks of dried fish and bread are stacked, a small cask of ale wrapped against the cold, a pot suitable for hanging over a stranger's fire. Then come the items meant for trade or gift. A bundle of well-dried stockfish, a rolled length of homespun cloth, a set of carefully carved wooden bowls. Finally, weapons and tools are checked. Each traveling man carries a belt knife and a sturdy walking staff. One brings an axe, as useful for cutting wood as it would be in a fight. When the loads are secured and cloaks are fastened, it is time to say goodbye. The travelers stand near the doorway. Those staying behind gather around: wife, younger children, older relatives, servants. There are no elaborate speeches. Partings in such a world are too common for grand declarations, but there are gestures that carry weight. The farmer's wife adjusts the edge of his cloak, tying it more securely. She checks the knot of his belt. Their eyes meet briefly. To his son, the farmer gives a final, firm clap on the shoulder, a wordless mix of trust, expectation, and warning. Then the men take hold of the sled ropes, lean forward, and step out into the wider world. The first stretch of the journey follows the familiar route along the fjord's edge. Where the snow lies evenly, the sled runners glide smoothly, making a soft, steady hiss. Where drifts have formed, the men's boots sink deeper, and the sleds lurch, requiring more effort. They settle into a rhythm. Lean forward, pull, feel the runners slide, then drag in rougher patches. Breathe in time with the work. The world along the road is both known and altered. Familiar outcroppings wear strange white shapes. Small streams lie silent under translucent ice. Here and there, smoke rises from other farms. At some, figures wave briefly from doorways. The travelers lift a hand in greeting, but do not stop. As the day goes on, they encounter other travelers. A pair of men coming from further inland, their sled loaded with sacks. A woman and an older boy leading a small group of sheep along a packed path. On a stretch of ice near the mouth of a shallow river, they even see a small group using bone skates, gliding quickly across the surface. Each meeting brings a brief exchange of words. They ask about the condition of the road ahead, whether any hazards lie hidden. News moves along these paths like warmth along a shared bench. From one group, they hear that the river near the Thing site is still frozen solid enough to cross safely. From another, they learn that a small band of men from a neighboring district passed this way the previous day, armed and well-equipped for debate or for trouble. Such information is weighed carefully, stored against the moment it might matter. By late afternoon, the light begins to weaken, but the travelers can see their goal ahead. The Thing site is not marked by a permanent stone building. Instead, it is a place in the landscape chosen and returned to. A relatively level area near a fordable stretch of river, sheltered somewhat from the worst winds. As they crest a low rise, they see it. Smoke rises from several fires already kindled. Dark shapes of tents or temporary shelters dot the snow. Boats pulled up on the bank show where those who traveled by water have arrived. Figures move between these shelters. The sound of voices carries faintly across the frozen ground. The travelers feel a small tightening in their chests. They are leaving the narrow, known world of their home fjord and stepping into a wider field of power, judgment, and opportunity. They adjust their grips on the sled ropes, straighten their backs despite fatigue, and walk on toward the gathering. Chapter 13. At the Thing, a gathering of many houses. The light is fading by the time they reach the place chosen for the Thing. From the low rise where they pause, they look down over a shallow, snow-covered basin close to the river. Smoke hangs there in thin layers, drifting from several fires that already burn, among low tents, rough shelters, and pulled-up boats. Voices carry, short shouts, snatches of laughter, the rhythm of many people talking at once. The three travelers stand for a moment and simply take it in. After the stripped quiet of winter at home, this concentration of life feels intense. They walk down into it. A space is found for them near the edge of the gathering. There they drive simple stakes into the packed earth and stretch a piece of sailcloth between them and the sleds. Bedding is unrolled, goods are stacked where they can be watched. A small fire is kindled. Their first meal here is plain: bread, dried fish, a warm drink. The richness of the thing is not in its food, but in the density of people and the possibilities that come with them. The formal heart of the thing is not the fires or the tents, but a particular spot marked out in the landscape. The next morning, the farmer and his companions make their way toward it with the others. It might be a slight mound or a stone outcrop, or simply an area ringed off by agreement. Whatever its exact form, everyone knows here is where the law speaker will stand. Men and a few women gather in a rough circle. Those of higher status or stronger voice stand closer, others cluster behind. When the time is right, the law speaker steps forward. He raises his hand and calls for quiet. The murmuring fades. Then he begins to recite. Not all of the law, not in one day, but a chosen portion, perhaps rules about land and boundaries, or about injury and compensation. The phrases come in set patterns, shaped to be remembered and recognized. Those listening nod at familiar parts. Young ones listen with sharp attention. One day, they too will need to remember these words. After the recitation, the thing turns to specific cases. The farmer and his companions watch as men step forward to speak. Two farmers argue over a piece of meadow whose boundaries have become uncertain since a hillside slip changed the course of a small stream. Each has a memory of where the line once lay. Witnesses are called, older men who remember walking the boundary in summer pastures. They speak, sometimes hesitantly, sometimes firmly. The law speaker and other respected men ask questions. Was a stone placed? Was a certain rock or tree once named as a marker? Slowly, a picture forms. A compromise is suggested. A shared use, perhaps, combined with small compensation. The parties are not entirely pleased, but they see the sense in it. Oaths are taken. Hands are shaken. The crowd murmurs its approval. In another case, a man who accidentally injured another during joint work stands before the assembly to confirm what has already been done. He has given firewood, helped with harvest, and is prepared to offer a portion of meat or an animal. The injured man's kin state publicly that they consider the matter settled. The law speaker speaks a few formal words that fix this agreement in the memory of those present. The farmer from our fjord watches all this closely, his son at his side. These patterns are not entertainment, they are instruction. Later, the farmer and his neighboring kinsmen take their turn. They step forward and explain their concern, the boundary marker between their farm and a neighbor's, unsettled by earth movements and heavy snows. They are careful in how they speak. They do not accuse the other farmer of wrongdoing. Instead, they explain that the land has changed shape, that they have shared the use of the contested patch so far, and that they seek clarity now. This tone matters. It tells listeners that they care about right order more than winning advantage. If the other farmer is present, he too steps forward. Perhaps he nods and confirms the story. The law speaker and others listen, then advise a practical course. When the snow has melted, witnesses from both households will walk the hillside together. New markers will be placed where all agree. The thing does not solve every problem immediately. Instead, it sets a path for peace. The two sides agree, those standing nearby hear. When the farmer and his kinsmen step back, they carry with them not just an answer, but the sense that the wider community has seen their attempt to act fairly. The thing is not only about law, it is also a marketplace. Between and after formal sessions, people drift through the loose streets of tents and sleds. Goods are laid out on skins or rough boards. Our farmer and his companions bring their own small array, bundles of stockfish, a woven length of cloth, carved bowls. They set them near their shelter where passing eyes can see. Others have brought different wares. There are men with iron tools, axe heads, knives, nails. A few show off pattern-welded blades. There are women and men with textiles, heavier wool for cloaks, finer weaves for tunics. A trader from a more southern harbour lays out glass beads strung on cord. They glow, blues and greens, amber tones, occasional bright whites. Children stare, adults look too, calculating cost. Our farmer does not have silver to spend freely, but he may trade some of his fish for a small item, a pair of beads for his wife's adornment, or a sharper axe head. Each exchange is a quiet negotiation. Weight is tested, edges examined, cloth rubbed between fingers. As the day goes on, the farmer and his son move among the clusters of people, listening, learning, being seen. They note who stands surrounded by many supporters and who keeps to the edges, who speaks loudly and who says little but is listened to. They hear news firsthand now, not only from the kinsmen who visited their hall, but from others whose paths have taken them to central harbours and even out of the region entirely.
They hear of a distant chieftain who has accepted baptism, of a ship that went east to trade along long rivers, of a winter of sickness in another fjord. Names are attached to these stories. So-and-so's son has married into a powerful family. Another man is said to have broken an oath. The son listens especially hard. He is learning not only what the world is like, but how to fit into it. For the farmer, this wider web of information helps him place his own small farm in its true context. Their choices matter, if only to a modest circle of people. When the second night falls on the assembly ground, it has a different feel from the first. Fires burn low and bright across the snow. Dark shapes of tents make a low, irregular skyline. Around one fire, men argue in low voices over the terms of a proposed marriage alliance. Around another, someone retells a case from earlier, painting himself in a slightly better light. Laughter rises from one cluster where someone sings a mildly indecent song. Our farmer and his companions sit near their own small fire, bowls in hand, cloaks drawn close. At some point, the law speaker passes by their small group, exchanging a few words with the farmer. Nothing heavy, just a greeting, a short comment on the fairness of the boundary plan. Even so, that brief contact will become part of the story told back home. He spoke well of our case. As the night deepens, fires shrink. People settle into their shelters. The assembly ground becomes a shallow bowl of dim glows and soft breathing. By the time dawn begins to soak into the eastern sky again, the main work of the thing is done. Our farmer and his companions pack their sleds in the thin morning light. Hands are clasped with allies and new acquaintances. Short farewells are spoken. We will see you at summer's thing. Then they lean into their sled ropes and begin the journey back. The road home is familiar now, yet there is a sense of direction, back toward the known curves of their fjord, back toward the Longhouse, back toward the people who will be waiting to hear what the thing decided. By the time they see the familiar outline of their farm again, smoke rising from the roof hole, the thing will already be turning into story, ready to be poured out in the warm dimness of the hall on another winter evening. Chapter 14, Return to the Longhouse, News by the Fire. The journey home follows the same curves of coastline as the journey out, but it feels different now. The travellers carry more than goods. They carry decisions. A boundary to be reset in spring, a small injury formally resolved, new impressions of people they once only knew by name. They walk with the slow, steady rhythm of people who have worked hard but are not in danger. When at last they round the final bend and see their own farm, a dark longhouse under its strip of turf and snow, thin smoke rising, they feel a small lift inside. Word runs ahead of them, children at the doorway shouting, the dog barking. By the time the travellers reach the cleared path, people are waiting, the farmer's wife, younger children, older kin, servants. There are no embraces thrown wildly. Gestures are smaller but no less real. A cloak is taken and shaken free of frost. A sled rope is lifted from a tired hand. Someone laughs softly when they see that everyone is sound and whole. They pass inside, ducking through the low doorway back into the warm dimness of the hall. At first, there is only the practical business of arrival. Boots are pulled off, cloaks are hung, fingers are stretched out toward the fire. Bowls of hot food are placed in travel-calloused hands. Only then does the farmer give the first short version of the trip. Yes, the river ice held. Yes, many were there. Yes, our cases went fairly. He sketches in a few lines. The law speaker's recitation, the boundary plan agreed, the confirmation of compensation for the old injury. For now, the main thing is clear. They went, they did what needed doing, they came back. Later, the sleds are fully unpacked. A few new objects emerge, a small iron tool, a pair of glass beads that catch the firelight, a slightly finer knife than the son carried before. Each item has a story attached, and when hands have settled into the rhythm of evening tasks, those stories emerge in fuller form. The farmer tells how he weighed fish against the trader's price. He describes a face or a voice from another district. The son adds his own details. How many fires there were, the sound of many men coughing in the cold evening air, the way the law speaker's voice carried. The younger children listen with shining eyes. The older ones listen more soberly, gauging what all this means for their household. In the following days, the results of the thing sink in. The agreement about the hillside boundary is repeated several times. How witnesses will walk the land when snow has gone. How stones will be set where all can see. The confirmation of compensation for the old injury. For now, the main thing is clear. They went, they did what needed doing, they came back. Later, the sleds are fully unpacked. A few new objects emerge, a small iron tool, a pair of glass beads that catch the firelight, a slightly finer knife than the son carried before. Each item has a story attached, and when hands have settled into the rhythm of evening tasks, those stories emerge in fuller form. The farmer tells how he weighed fish against the trader's price. He describes a face or a voice from another district. The son adds his own details. How many fires there were, the sound of many men coughing in the cold evening air, the way the law speaker's voice carried. The younger children listen with shining eyes. The older ones listen more soberly, gauging what all this means for their household. In the following days, the results of the thing sink in. The agreement about the hillside boundary is repeated several times. How witnesses will walk the land when snow has gone. How stones will be set where all can see.
The story of the injury case is also told. Most of all, people listen for hints of how their farmer himself was seen. That was spoken of as fair, an older kinsman might remark. Or, the law speaker nodded at your words. These small observations are noted and remembered. Reputation is as valuable as any physical good. One evening, the hall settles into a deeper stillness. The fire burns long and even. Work with hands continues, but voices fall into a hush, waiting. The farmer begins to tell the whole tale of the journey from start to finish. The day they chose to leave, the farms they passed, the first sight of the assembly ground, the cases heard, including their own, the trades made, the people met, the journey back. He does not rush, he takes his time. In the telling, the journey is fixed in the shared memory of the household. Even those who never set foot on the thing's field now carry an image of it in their minds. The Longhouse once more becomes what it often is, a place where far places and events come home, shaped by the voice of someone who was there. Chapter 15, Turning of the Year. Winter gives way. Time moves, as it always has, in slow, persistent steps. The deepest cold begins, almost imperceptibly, to loosen. Days lengthen, first by moments, then by whole breaths of light. Snow that once squeaked hard under boots now softens in the afternoon. Icicles drip and freeze, drip and freeze. On south-facing slopes, dark patches appear where the sun's angle is strongest. A hint of earth smell rises, damp soil under rotting stems. Inside the hall, the work shifts tone. Winter tasks are still there, but more and more, talk and hands turn to what must be ready for spring. Harness straps checked, plough parts examined, seed grain containers inspected. People step outside more often just to look, judging the snow line, watching for the first true signs that the land is waking. The animals feel it too. Cattle low more often, tossing their heads, restless with the smell of air that no longer bites so deeply. Sheep stamp and crowd the byre door as if hoping that one morning they will be allowed out. The dog spends more time outdoors, nose pressed to the faint breezes. Children test the snow crust. In the morning it is firm enough to walk on top. By afternoon their feet punch through, soaking leggings. Adults watch with a more measured eye. They know that melt brings its own hazards, swollen streams, roofs suddenly burdened with wet snow. Still, the trend is clear. Winter is no longer the unchallenged ruler of the land. One day comes when a small patch of field emerges fully from its winter cover. It is not much, a ragged brown rectangle where snow has thinned. Yet to the household, it is a milestone. The farmer and his eldest step out with tools, not to plough, not yet, but to see what the earth has to say. They break the top layer gently. The soil beneath is cold, but no longer frozen solid. It crumbles slowly instead of ringing like stone. They judge its moisture, its smell, its feel between fingers. Soon enough, the whole field will demand their strength and time. For now, this small patch is a promise. As days grow longer, the quality of light within the longhouse changes. Sunlight shafts through the smoke hole at new angles, catching dust and smoke in brighter columns. It lies for longer across the benches and the posts. The fire in the hearth is still needed, but it is no longer a constant battle against killing cold. Clothing shifts too. Fewer layers are worn indoors. People speak of the time when they will work outdoors with sleeves rolled and faces bare to the sun. The soundscape changes. Water runs audibly somewhere outside, small streams freed from ice. Birds begin to call differently, their winter quiet giving way to more complex songs. The longhouse is still the center of life, but the walls feel less absolute. The world beyond them is waking, calling people outward. As the season turns, this particular winter, its great storm, its visitors, its journey to the Thing, begins to take its place among others in memory. To those in the hall, it will not be the only winter they live through. There were hard winters before, there will be milder seasons and harsher ones ahead. Children will grow, elders will die, new faces will take their places. Yet this winter will be remembered in certain ways. The year the snow banked up to half the byre door. The year we went to the Thing and reset the boundary. The year our kinsman told us about the cross carved on a gatepost. These details anchor it in time. The longhouse will change too. Beams will be replaced, roof turf will be renewed. But its essential rhythm, fire at the center, people along the sides, animals at one end, smoke above. The winter you have followed is only one layer on a much older and longer story of people doing the same things, waking fires, tending animals, making and mending, telling stories and reaching toward a wider world. Epilogue, a single day, a wider age. Imagine now drawing slowly back from the longhouse. At first, you see only this one building in its winter world, smoke rising against pale sky, snow curving around turf-covered walls, small figures moving along cleared paths. Pull back further, and more such halls appear along the fjords and valleys, some larger, some smaller, some belonging to powerful chieftains, some to modest farmers. Further still, and ships come into view, Some pulled up on winter shores, some remembered in stories, some out at sea in gentler seasons, stitching together coasts and islands. Pull back again, and the whole Viking Age shows itself, not only as a time of warriors and voyages, but as an era made up of countless days like the ones you have walked through. Days of tending cattle and sheep, of carding wool and weaving cloth, of teaching children and planning marriages, of listening to law spoken aloud, of standing in doorways watching storms come and go. This longhouse, on this fjord, in the winter around the year 950, is one thread among many. The great stories of kings, battles, and far voyages depend, quietly but completely, on places like this. And now, in your imagination, you step back to the doorway of the hall one more time. Inside, the fire burns steadily. The benches hold sleeping forms under wool and fur. Above, the beams are dark with smoke of many years. Outside, winter is loosening, the year is turning. You leave them there, on the edge of spring, with work to do and seasons yet to come, knowing that, while their world is distant in time, the patterns of their days are not completely foreign. Warmth and cold, danger and safety, scarcity and planning, law and story, kin and strangers, endings and new beginnings. The ember-bright glow of the longhouse fades now in your mind. The storm has passed, the winter has turned, and the fire at the center of this story can rest. Sleep well.